he's here. Gary.
Gary, what's happening, Ronnie?
You all right, mate?
Yeah, thanks for having me, bro.
Yeah. It's finally we got it here. Now, for a lot of people, they won't know this, but we tried to do this about 2.5 years ago. Do you remember?
Yeah, I do.
And we got so far down into
then the fire alarm went
and then the fire alarm went off, and unfortunately, it's taken 2.5 years to get you back in the chair, you know. But a lot of people have requested it.
Okay, which
a
is
lot
nice.
of people have requested it.
Which is nice.
A lot of people in the comments, they give suggestions about who to have on next, etc. And your name's popped up quite a bit.
Right, that's
and
nice.
so, and for those of you who don't know the relationship that Gary and I have, I'm going to call him Gary or G or whatever during the course of the interview, is that we've known each other for over 50 years.
Yeah.
That's mental when you think about it.
To know this brother as well, you know what I mean? So.
Yeah. For over 50 years. Yeah. It's a long time. And just to give some context, why have we known each other for over 50 years? Because we were actually next door neighbours.
And so we used to hear when each other used to get lashes.
When we used to get licks. When we used to be, please, mummy, can I play out?
All the rest of it.
Do you know what I mean? You know, we know more about each other than probably definitely anybody else. So in a way, this conversation, while we're going to go through things that I already know, it's important that I try to kind of like not skirt over things, keep calm. Yeah. You know what I mean?
It could go anywhere.
Yeah, it could go anywhere. That's the truth. Yeah. But as you know, and I know you watch the podcast, what we do like to do is start right from the very beginning of everybody's sort of like entry even into the world, you know, like so, and that's kind of like starts with your parents, your heritage, and your earliest memories as a child. So where are you from, and where's your parents from?
So my family, which everybody knows, is from St Lucia. From, you know, my mum's was from one small village and my dad was from another small village. And, you know, my dad used to walk for miles and miles, you know, to the other village to go and court my mother. And, you know, out of that, it was a beautiful relationship. You know, I used to sit down and my dad would say to me, he would tell me the stories about, you know, my mum, you know, Gary, how much I did love your mum. I'd walk for, you know, for miles, 10 miles to go meet your mum and stuff. And so there was loads of beautiful stories about, you know, how they met. And yeah, you know, it was a beautiful relationship, 3 siblings, you know, 1 stepsister and 2 stepbrothers.
Right, okay, yeah.
And so it was quite a big family.
Yeah. Yeah, I know for me, I know you, Roy and Sammy.
Yeah.
You know, like they're my brothers, you know what I mean?
Right.
You know, like they're my brothers, as you know.
Well, your family's my family, my family's your family.
Desmond and Lenny, you know? And then you came as a little baby boy at the end.
Yeah, I was the third, I'm the last one.
That's right.
Yeah, the little fat one.
Right, and I know you were quite spoiled.
Shut up, man.
Right?
Move on.
I know, is spoiled the right word? You were definitely cherished a lot, I think, and got away with a lot more than your older brothers did. That's right. Yeah. So tell me some of your earliest memories about being a child, you know, like being at home.
Childhood was, you know, pretty mixed. I mean, I went to school, Clissar Park School. I didn't really think school was for me. Do you know what I mean? I was always kind of like mischievous, always getting in trouble, suspended, you know, and all the rest of it in school. I didn't, you know, I knew from then I was more of a creative, more than academic. And so, you know, I was a little bit problematic in school. But school was fun. Do you know what I mean? I think probably my favorite lessons was probably drama more than anything else. But otherwise, I just wanted to get out of school. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't wait till school finished, to be honest with you.
Yeah. You know, even before secondary school, you know, like I remember you used to be out a lot, hanging around with people like Melvin.
Yeah, Melvin Fay.
Yeah, and what have you. So tell me about those eras, like, you know, like...
they were young eras, you know what I mean? That was when I was pretty young, me and Melvin used to hang about, obviously because we lived across the road from each other. You was my neighbour over there, and Melvin was across the road. Melvin come from an Irish family background, you know, and we, you know, used to get like the skateboards and stuff. And we, you know, he was the first guy. We actually was the first people around the estate to make our own roller skates because we couldn't afford roller skates or skateboard. And so we actually got a pair of old trainers and a piece of wood from the wood shop across the road there, Smith & Sons.
Smith & Sons, yeah.
And got a skateboard truck and banged the nail right through the trainer, through the piece of wood and the skateboard truck and bent it round. And we made our own roller skates, do you know what I mean? And so Melvin was a big part of my life. Do you know what I mean? I used to go over there, eat their food. On a Sunday, he'd come over to my mum's and eat mum's cooking, you know, we like that, it was like that.
Yeah, it's interesting because on that estate as well, pretty much on that estate, Spoonie was on that estate as well.
Spoonie was on that estate.
Yeah.
Hype was round the corner.
Kevin was down the road, yeah.
And Shut Up and Dance was across the road as well.
And Carl and Earl.
Yeah, was across the road.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So Hackney has a very strong connection to early electronic music.
Yeah, without a doubt.
From the earliest electronic music,
Without
but I mean even in that, it's quite interesting actually. I don't think anybody's ever documented that before, but even Carl and Earl, so this is Daddy Earl, and Smiley. Yeah.
We actually, me and Smiley used to, Princess May School, my primary school, my biological dad's brother was the caretaker.
Right.
And so me and Smiley he used to allow us to go up in the hall in the evening and start body popping and breakdancing and stuff. So he'd give us the keys to go upstairs in the hall in the school.
You see?
And so we used to put little speaker box thing running and we used to kind of like, we used to do what a good thing. Good days, man. You know what I mean?
Great days.
So we've got history.
Both of them boys were in my primary school in
really?
St Matthias. Yeah. We were in the same class.
Right.
Yeah, me, Smiley, Carl and Earl. Right. That's what they are, Carl and Earl. We were in the same school, primary school together. So it's quite a connection. And then obviously, here we are, like 50 plus years later, and all of us in some way or another are still connected. Yeah. It says a lot about that. Big up Trevor Nelson as well, because we can't leave out Trevor.
It's quite insane, you know what I mean, that space, how much talent came out of that space, you know what I mean, from that estate there. Do you know what I mean? It's pretty crazy, really.
Yeah. Go. I want to just speak about like what it was like in the home in terms of, like music and sort of like your musical sort of interests. This is before you had your own. I'm talking about like what may have influenced you when you were growing up.
What influenced me at that time was that my family was pretty musical in respects of my brothers had a sound system. And my cousin Cassius had a sound called, at the time, was Apollo, which turned into Manhattan Sound. And so at an early age, from, I don't know, maybe 14, 15, I was totally surrounded by music, sound system culture. And so I used to go to Cassius's house. We used to live in Clapton, Mount Pleasant. He used to play me tunes, soul, funk, ska, rare grooves and stuff. And then, obviously I'd come home and then my brothers would be upstairs. I had the speakers and stuff. They would be playing music upstairs. And then my dad would be playing his soca and calypso downstairs. And then my uncle would have the same uncle, Uncle Felix. You remember Uncle Felix?
Yeah, of course I do.
Uncle Fefe. Uncle Fefe used to have, when I used to go and see him, he was a hoarder. And so when you used to go into his house, he would have his own setup that he'd made. And he used to, when you go into train stations, you see the big horns for the announcements. He used to nick them and use them as tweeters for his sound. So, I was constantly around music. And so I got educated quite young. Obviously in my mind, I thought to myself, I always wanted to be involved. I didn't know where or how, but I knew that I was going to be involved in music.
Yeah. And that was from like very young, like
very young,
like 10 and stuff.
9 years old.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Young.
It's interesting because I know I didn't have any sort of aspirations till much later on. Although, like yourself, the creativity was there and whatever, So, all right then, so you're growing up as a young boy in Hackney, you're living in Spencer Grove.
Yeah, we was living in Spencer
We were
Grove.
living in Spencer Grove, Milton Gardens Estate.
That was
and obviously you know, like we joke a lot about listening to each other getting licks and stuff like that. But the reality was that I know that certainly, I don't want to speak for you, but you know, it wasn't easy, you know, growing up in those times.
No. I mean, you know, it was a complete different era that time there, and you know, life was different. You know, things was much more harder. You know, community. One thing I would say though, community at that time was much more together. I would say, and so therefore, even though it was hard, there was the community sense of it kind of contributed to, you know, just like the way how we kind of grew. And I love going back around there, do you know what I mean? Because although it's a little bit gentrified, it still has that kind of rough edge. And, you know, there's still pretty respectful around there. You know, from when I left how many years ago, there's still some of the same people that live there. And so, you know, you see them like, oh, Gary, how was your mum? And that's still nice to be around, do you know what I mean? And so, you know, for my brother, when I look at him, you know, running the youth centre, him and Carly, I think to myself, you haven't left here. Do you know what I mean? I've left there and moved to there and moved to there, and you've been there for the last, you know, 40-something years. So it's quite interesting to go back. I mean, I always go back to the area because I still have my love, you know what I mean, for Hackney, you know, because that's where I was brought up. But it's still quite beautiful to see that there's some good things going on in the community aspect of it. It's still there.
Yeah. You were speaking about secondary school. You're saying that you wasn't really that much of an academic. I can imagine that
I was just bored in school. I just needed
and that was
something.
The same for you at primary school.
Yeah.
Do you
know what I mean? Primary school wasn't too bad, you know. But secondary school was definitely like, secondary school was cool. But I just, you know, for me, I need to be like, you know, like, give me something. Otherwise, you know, my attendance man is just like, oh, I'm bored. And the next thing, you know, I had to start problems in the class. You know, my mum had to come up to school plenty of times and give me a little clap. You know, they couldn't wait to call my mum. Oh, Miss Francis, yeah, you know, Gary's causing a problem again. You know, then my mum had to come from Edmonton, which was far, come over to the school, sit down. The teacher couldn't wait. You know, he's disrupted the class, these things, because I was just bored. Do you know what I mean? I just needed something to just keep my attendance man, just like keep it, you know, it bubbling. And so...
Is that why you tried to burn down the school?
No, I never tried to burn down the school. Come on, then get to the fire.
No, because I mean, I didn't know this until very recently. But I got to find out that you were...
a firebug.
Yeah. That you like fire.
Yeah, don't ask me why I like fire, but I really like a little fire.
Oh, yeah.
So, I don't know, do you know what I mean? I just had this fascination with fire when I was a kid. And one time I was in the bathroom, I just was in there, and I lit some matches in the bathroom, in the little bin in the bathroom. And, you know, some little flames was coming, and I was trying to out it, couldn't out it quick enough. My brother went and grasped me up. You know, he used to work for Seiko Digital Watches. He had all the little screwdrivers, you know, and bust open the door. And then, you know, you can imagine the rest. My mum just gave me some claps, like, you know, what's going on there and thing. But I had a little fascination with fire.
But you've come out of that now.
From a long time. What me I say, this, I'm on yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So with secondary schools, tell me a bit about your kind of like relationship with your other peers there and your other school teachers and stuff like that.
Okay, so basically there was one teacher called Miss Judy Holder, which was the form teacher. She was such a lovely lady, and we all gave her pressure in the class. She just wanted us to have a good education, you know, but we was just kind of like, you know, wasn't really interested, you know. And God, if I saw Judy Holder now, I would give her a big hug and say, I'm so sorry, do you know what I mean? Because she was trying her best. And so, you know, at that time there, she was really the only teacher who cared really for us, our form teacher. You know, she had, when you think about the people in our class, there were some people who wanted to learn, and there were some people who just didn't really care. And so that was in my class. And so me and him used to get up to a lot of mischief and stuff, you know what I mean? We ended up getting suspended a good few times. You know, but he was a bit better in school than me. Do you know what I mean? He kind of had his head down more in his books than me. But I just needed to get out. school, I was just bored, man. Do you know what I mean? For me, school was like jokes and fun. And then my brother had said to me, you know, it was Sammy, who's quite educated, said to me, you know what, Gary, you really need to buckle down and stuff. And I tried, do you know what I mean, the following year, the last year that was, but it made no difference. Do you understand what I mean? And so even though I would moan about school, there was some good years. Do you understand? I only understood after, when I came out of school, that, you know, they were your best times. Do you know what I mean? You don't realize that when you're in school, but when you're out and you become older, you know, you think to yourself, you know what, actually school was actually the best times. It was times for you to really, like, you know, there was loads of people, you interact with everybody and, you know, you'd have fun with everybody. And so, yeah, Miss Judy Holder was the only one who was really trying to help everybody and me too. But there's one teacher that stands out of all of them, which was Mr. Gibson. Do you know what I mean? And Mr. Gibson used to wear this same old dead-out suit all the time and had this stinking coffee breath. And I just didn't get on with him. He was the science teacher, Mr. Gibson. And he said to me one time, Mr. Francis, you'll be nothing. Do you know what I mean?
Good, that's a classic
Yeah,
cliche.
you'll be nothing, Mr. Francis. You know, he'd said that, you know, school had finished. And so I bought this BMW one time from Marley Marl, the original car man. So I bought this BMW. So I bought this BMW and I'm driving back to the school. This is a few years later, and to go and use the gym. And as I'm driving in back to the school, I see Mr. Gibson with the same suit on. And I'm like, Mr. Gibson, you remember me? He said, I'll be nothing. Look at my car. You know what I mean? Look at my ride. And he looked at me, you know, that looked like, and I thought, yeah, you know what I mean? People like you. Do you understand what I mean? Because that actually quite scarred me.
I've heard that, and I know a lot of people have said to me that it's been said to them, oh, you'll amount to nothing. I don't think that's appropriate.
No, of course not. Especially at that age.
Especially because you're that young.
Yeah, of course.
And you've got all your life to go.
It kind of, you know, drove me to do, you know, better for myself.
Yeah.
And so if anything that came out of
fuel,
it. If anything came out of it, that I ended up doing better, you know what I mean, for myself.
What was it like with your relationship at the time with you and Det at school? Because you were in the same class, right?
Me and Det was in the same class from first year all the way to fifth year, whatever it was.
That's nuts.
Yeah, I know. And so,
it's mad how these things are just linked.
I know.
It's crazy.
And so, you know, we used to be mischievous. We used to get suspended. There was one time, you know, we got suspended. I can't remember what it was, you know what I mean, in the morning. So we had to come out of the school. So it was me, Det, and Chibi, this guy called Chibi Ekelebu. And so I said to them, yo, come round my yard, man. Let's go to my house, you know what I mean? And my dad used to work night times. He used to work at nights. He used to work for Coca-Cola. And so I said, come, let's go to my yard, you know what I mean? So we've gone to my house. I said, you don't wait out here. So I've gone into the bed, my dad's bedroom, while my dad was sleeping, and kind of was on some combat military thing there to go and get his keys from his pocket, got the keys, and I said, come. And then I just got in his car. He used to have this beige Marina. I said, Jesus, come. So we got in the car, my dad's car. Me and Dad was driving around the block for about, I don't know, 15 minutes. And I went to go and try and park the car back up where it originally was, but somebody had parked there. And so I had to find another little spot to park the car. And then, you know, parked up the car, come back, you know, do the little thing again, combat thing there, put the keys back into his pocket, you know what I mean? And then we was out doing whatever we was doing, do you know what I mean? So we used to get up to some bits and pieces, you know what I mean?
I mean, it's funny that both of you end up being MCs.
Yeah. But you know the funny thing about that, the irony about that, is that when I was going out, so I was going out and found out about the music while I was in school, this girl, Julie Braithwaite, who was in our class. You know, and this thing was already talking about, you know, Gary Veard about this acid house. I said, yeah, you know what I mean? I know about this thing. And so me and Julie ended up going out to some warehouse things and some little house parties where people have a little paisley shirt, you know, little art stroll playing and people dancing and thing and whatever. And then I would come back to school on a Monday and Det would say to me, hey, you're in the Devilman thing, innit? You got to tell them about part, innit? I said, bruv, you don't know about it, don't knock it, you know, right? And then, you know, ironically, years later, you know, I get into it properly and then, you know, I'm part of this thing. And then we both end up being part of this, you know, from Chicago house to acid house to breaks to jungle, and then we both involved in this scene, in this music. So it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, it
from
really
school.
is. Yeah, it really,
You know what I
is.
mean?
And that is two MCs as well.
Yeah.
It was you two who were hanging about in class, and that you had no connection to MCing before that.
No, we was into hip hop. We was into
together.
Hip-hop. Yeah, we was all into. At that time, it was the hip hop days.
Right.
And so my name was MC Deuce. And so
Deuce.
Yeah, D-U-C-E.
You're right. Okay. Yeah.
MC
Yeah.
Deuce.
Yeah.
And so I can't remember what that's name was anyway. So we'd be in the school on the tables, you know what I mean, banging, I'm MC Deuce, in the place to be. Rock to have been at the party, and then he would come in, and it was that kind of thing. And so maybe we was already destined, you know what I mean, to be MCs, you know what I mean?
We spoke about when you were 16 and you left home. So it seemed like you didn't really want to speak about the challenges you faced.
The way you asked him in my business, wasn't it? No, okay. You know what I mean? I'm a bridget, 50 years, so we can talk. Okay. So you know what? I was just going through, I was going through a transition at that time there of, you know, things at home, you know, me being out all the time, me wanting my own independence. And, you know, I just felt like I needed to just go my own way, you know. And at that time there, I feel like I was quite adult enough. I just felt like, you know what, I just need to make it out on my own. Can I go and do this? And I did. Yeah.
You're 16. And you spoke when you were at school that being 16 was at the same time that was happening, the acid rave scene had already started. So this move to this girls in Peckham, the squat. The squat in Peckham, while you were living there, were you already kind of like going to parties and stuff like that?
I was going out to little warehouse parties and stuff like that. You know, at that time, I was just kind of just partying and doing my thing. So, you know, there's odd little warehouse things going on and stuff. But yeah, I was already out.
And then would you say that was the same time, or was it before then? Because remember, you're 16 years old, right? You're 16 years old. You just left school.
Yeah.
You've got your challenges at home with your parents, and you're squatting. I'm just trying to get the timeline here. And the acid rave scene is on. Have we missed a big chunk of your musical sort of like experience in terms of like sound system culture?
Yeah, there's a lot, because when I was 14, 15, I was going to 4 Aces.
Right, there you go.
4 Aces, which I used to go and listen to Unity, Coxon.
Big up Demon Rocker.
Big up the Rockers and the brothers them. So yeah, I was going to 4 Aces, me, Ribs, you know, and a few of us, a guy called Ribs, Andrew. I was going to Trends, Shinola's, One Way Club over by, I think it was Peckham. You know, I was out, like before that transition of going into that, listening to that music, I was listening to soul funk, you know what I mean? Soul funk, reggae, going to all of these parties, because at them times there, it was, you know, it was sound system culture there. So it would be like TNT, Rap Attack, Beat Freak, Saxon, Coxon, you know what I mean? I was out, you know, going out to all of these parties. I was like 14, 15, you know, trying to get into local blues, shubs. Do you understand what I mean? Over Dalston, Shinola's, big people there. Like, I just wanted to be out, you know what I mean? I just needed to be around music. And so I think, you know, I was kind of doing my mum's head in, you know, and my dad's head in, like, you know, my mum and dad were really, really cool. You know, I was brought up by my stepdad, who was just my dad. I knew my biological dad.
Yeah, because I only ever knew Derek. I've only ever known Derek. Yeah.
But, you know, my stepdad, he's just my dad. You know, I knew my biological dad, but I just wasn't entertaining until I stopped talking to him about 16. I wanted some money for something, you know what I mean? I wanted some money, actually, to go and buy this Jeep that cost £300. Right? So I said, Mum, you know what? I need I'm trying to find this thing or whatever. So she goes to me, well, ask your dad. Go and ask your biological, go and ask Reggie, and tell him you need it to go and get the operation on your foot. I said, all right then, Mum. I said, I already got a little piece of thinking we'll save you. So I've gone anyway, over by Mayor Street, he was living at the time. I never really rated him anyway, do you know what I mean? So I've gone over there and I'm like, you know, his new partner's there, and I'm like, hello, can I speak to, you know, Dad? Reggie, do you know what I mean? Yeah, he's upstairs. So I go up there What's happening, Dad? You know what I mean? He's like, oh, you all right? I said, yeah. I said, look, you know what I mean? Mum said I should come and check you because I need to get, I'm going to the hospital to go and get this foot done, and she's helping with the money. I've got some, well, I don't have no money and things. I said, you know what? Stop right there. I said, you'll never see me again. And that was it. Yeah, that was it. And I never saw it. You know, it was irrelevant. You know what I mean? It was irrelevant in my life. You know, I went and found him 30-something years later, you know, but my dad who raised me, you know, Derek,
God rest his soul.
Your name, that's my father. You know what I mean? He, you know, took me to my first boxing. You know, I needed to let off some steam. He brought me over by Pitford Street, you know, Lions Boys Club to go and box, and that. He did everything. Do you understand what I mean? You know, so I owe a lot of, you know, when I was an angry youth, to him helping me, you know, release some of that anger. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I was going to say that. I mean, you know, I've known you for years, you know what I mean? Anybody that knows you knows that you don't take things lightly. But I'm just thinking, maybe this was a trait that you had from very, very young.
Yeah, from young. You know what I mean? I was a hothead from young. I could admit that. Do you understand what I mean? I like to fight and stuff. And I was, you know, that was just one of them things. I had to do a lot of work on myself or ask myself, why was you so aggy, gal? Do you know what I mean? Or you didn't, you know, take shit from nobody. You know, I was always kind of like that person, like, I can't work for nobody. You know what I mean? I have to, like, you couldn't tell me nothing. From an early age, you couldn't tell me nothing. I wanted to fight. Do you understand what I mean? And so, you know, my old man just was like, okay, then we're going to channel this into something else. And so then, you know, he took me to boxing. I was there boxing with Zamo. He used to be on Grange Hill, Lee McDonald. The people never even know he was European champion. He was a Don. It was his dad who was training me. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah. And so, you know, at them times there, that was at Hoxton. Hoxton was racist, or Hoxton, Shoreditch and all them things. It was hard for you to walk around there with somebody of colour, you know, but I wanted to go and think I was the only man of colour in that gym. You know, I'm sparring with man, the man's whispering things in my ear when I take my head off. Do you understand what I mean? But it was good for me. Do you know what I mean? It kind of gave me some discipline and some worth. And so...
You hear that story a lot about people who go boxing, they're channeling the anger and whatever. And but then at the same time, learning a level of discipline and respect.
Which it did, because I could see that Roy, who was the trainer, God rest his soul, which was Zamo, Lee McDonald's dad, if you know about Grange Hill, he took a real shine into me, you know. And so it was me and Melvin who went boxing. It was me and Melvin, you know, while everybody's wearing at that time there, because there's Hoxton, a lot of East End man that was going in there with their kids. Everybody's got Lacoste on and Lonsdale. I just had some 81.
Running in like Mike.
Yeah, I would just add some
all black,
some old 81 t-shirt, some high shorts, some Bangarang tracksuit bottoms. You know, Melvin's got the picture, and I'm like, you know, it didn't really matter, even though them guys were the cool guys with all the gums and all of that. I just wanted to just learn how to box. Do you know what I mean? And it did me well, man. Definitely gave me discipline and respect. You know what I mean?
You know, we were saying just now about the sound systems and that clearly must have been happening simultaneously with the boxing era, right? Yeah. And then you spoke about ribs and what have you. Did you have your own sound system?
They had a sound called, a lot of people get this confused, think it's my sound system, but it was called Squadron Hi-Fi, which was Ribs. There's about 15 man. Ribs was the main man, though.
Right.
And then you had Izzy, the man that used to chat and stuff and all of that. And there's about 10 man, you know what I mean? And we used to kind of just move like as a firm, you know what I mean? And so, you know, we would go and play at Factory, Arcola Street. You know, we was kids, you know what I mean? You know, putting money together, buy box speakers, go high-tech and thing and, you know, and whatever. So, you know, we would play music together. And then next thing you know, me and Spoonie started getting together and thing, because them times that I'm playing music now, I can mix, I'm doing my thing. That time a little bit later, I start moving with these guys, Richie Fingers. But before that, me and Spoonie was having our little sound where we was playing at certain youth centres, Mayville Youth Centre and thing and whatever. I think it was Tom and Jerry we called ourselves or whatever. And I totally forgot that Spoonie said to me, Gary, you was one that playing music and I was MCing at the time.
Spoonie was MC.
Yeah, Spoonie was MC. Yeah, you ask him. He said, you was the one who was playing music.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. You was playing music, Gary, and I was MCing. And then, you know what I mean? And then things changed.
Yeah. And what sort of era was that? What sort of music
80s,
was you
that's
playing?
Like, you know, early 80s, Mantronics, Control, you know, hip hop, all mixed up in
it's
one.
kind of like, so that sounds to me like if I was to correlate that with a time, would be like the TNT days, and Rap Attack days and things like that. Yeah. So then, if that be the case, and you were playing that music, then how then do you then lean into getting into the house scene and things like that?
What was, you know, I remember at some point, like, you know, I was also going to Soul to Soul over African Centre. I was probably, you know, really, really young then. And then people started talking about this new thing, do you know what I mean? About this new movement, Chicago House. And it was like 10 City, Frankie Knuckles, Ron Hardy, you know, and it was just like house music at the time, Strictly Rhythm Perfecto label. And so, you know, I remember having this Beetle, this time that I got this blue Beetle, and for some reason, I always remember the registration was GYP761J. Don't ask me why, till this day I can remember that thing, because I was probably about 17 or something like that when I got a Beetle. But I remember at that time, you know, listening to a lot of this Chicago house, and I'm like, yo, this thing is, you know what I mean? You know, and then, you know, I'm going out to these little places where they're playing some of the music and stuff. And then I meet up, I can't remember exactly, like, you know, precise exact timing, but I meet up with these guys who are older than me. They're my brother's age. I know them through my brothers, Richie Fingers, Frankie Bones, Tony Tracks, Norris, the boss, Windross was part of it. But
weren't they flatmates or something?
They all lived in this guy called Seb's flat. It was by Stoke Newton, and that's where we used to go and play music and stuff. That was Tony's house, actually. Yeah. Tony and Seb lived there. Richie lived on Ellen Road, and so and Frank lived by Clissold Park. And so Frank had his system set up at his yard, and I was just itching, always wanting to play. And so I met these guys. Do you know what I mean? Was just kind of hanging around, wanted to be part of the thing there, and then I ended up being part of this firm of guys. But, you know, and Richie called them the Shag Crew. I mean, it sounds a bit finger, but now when you say it, the Shags.
That's right.
And it was the Shag Crew.
About that. Yeah.
Shag Crew. So
Richie
Fingers.
Yeah, Richie Fingers. Richie Shag Bones.
Frankie Shag Bones.
Frankie Shag Bones. That's it. Yeah.
And so it's me. So it's Richie, Frank. You know, I'm involved. There's a firm of them. Do you know what I mean? There's a big firm of them, and I'm the kid in the firm. And they all cool with me because they know my brothers and things like that. So I'm hanging about with them. And then they're playing at the Silver Lady pub, which, you know, this is like 80s, I don't know, 87, 86, 87. And it's a crossover of music. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit of this, it's a bit of that, some house, you know, Chicago house, and all kinds of music. And then we start putting on our own parties. And then we put this party on in this little warehouse by Clissold Park called Dead Man's Alley. And so they put on this thing there, and then you just had this little flyer, not even a flyer, it was a little card, just said acid on there. And so they was out giving out these cards to people like, you know, it's a legal party. Come there, like £3 or £5 to get in. And everybody's in there. Boy George ends up coming in there, do you know what I mean? Passing out on the floor over there, like loads of people over there. And so from that, we start doing all these other parties. They're putting on these other warehouses, and then we're working with other artists. And then, you know, we doing all these, you know, you're finding little warehouses and little places where to set up and do your thing. And so, you know, we're moving and we're doing that. And then we used to, Soul to Soul used to have a shop in Camden Town. And so we used to go to Soul to Soul, go to the shop in Camden Town and hire strobe lights, you know, and bits and pieces. And then, you know, they'd find the places and they'd set them up, and then we'd have a party. And so, you know, them guys are a big, big, big part of my life.
Do you know what? I didn't realise until now, but only because of how it goes. you being so young, at such an early stage, in this, being around like older, they were good guys. They weren't like on the road.
No.
They were
You
good
know
guys.
what? They were good guys, but at that time, you know, things were different. So everybody was kind of hustling and doing what they needed to do, because one man had a job on the side and then a man had lost a job and thing or whatever. And I personally never had a job when I left school. Do you know what I mean? I was like, okay, so what am I going to do? I was interested in cameras. So I wanted to do a camera course. So I ended up going and doing a YTS, a youth training scheme, which I was only doing it. I did like cameras, but at the end of it, the youth training scheme, on a Friday, you'd get like a £30 or £20. So really, me just want the money. Do you understand what I mean? But I did have an interest in cameras. So I went and done this course for maybe about 3 weeks. The woman, her name was Kath from Liverpool. And so she was training us how to take photos, give you a Pentax camera and go out and have a little look and take pictures of stuff. And I was really interested in photos. That was definitely a love for me. But when I find out about, you know, this party thing here, I'm like, I want to part of this thing here. And so I just put down the camera thing and then I was out. And in my mind, I'm like, I want to be involved in this, you know, this movement, which was happening at the time. I don't know how, you know, because I'm first going out and I'm feeling whatever, but I'm like, I want to be part of this. I want to be doing something in it, you know? And so I wanted to DJ so bad. I wanted to be a DJ so bad. And then it worked out that wasn't happening. You was part of my thing, you know what I mean, wanting to be a DJ, because I used to come over by a yard over Richmond Road. You know what I mean? When you were scratching and start spinning around the thing and start doing all the things and all that. You know, you might see Marky doing all that spin around, but you was doing that from 1980 something, you know? As a comrade, if you don't know, you need to really know. So you was a big inspiration. You're my brethren, but you was you hype. You know, we you know, I'd go out and watch I'm like, I want to do that. Do you know what I mean? And so, you know, I'm trying my best to do the thing and whatever, you know, but then, you know, the MC, it was like, that was where my voice was.
Yeah. You know, just not to leave the point about how influential, whether directly or indirectly, Richie, Tony, Frank,
them lot
and
played
Norris
a big part of my life to do with this thing here. And you know, I would always say that. Do you understand what I mean? Because growing up, hanging about with them guys, they, you know, still was a little bit lost. Them lot gave me guidance.
Yeah, this is the point I'm making.
Yeah, they gave me
because
guidance.
they were older than you.
They were older than me. Them lot was schooling me on the way how to do certain things. You know what I mean? And so I owe a lot to Richie, you know, and Frank and them lot there. I really do. And David as well. We'll talk about David after.
It seems to me two things. You being the baby of the bunch, with Tony and the guys and Richie, Frankie and Norris, they would have been either directly or indirectly very influential. Why? Because they're older than you. So vicariously, they're going to be doing things that you're going to learn, like manners, how to deal with things a little bit better, you know, organisation and so on and so on. Even mentoring, not directly, but in a way, But also, you know, seeing them, being at the parties with them, you know, no doubt you would have met people and so on who kind of like may have kind of also taken you to another level.
Yeah. So there was this monumental moment where we were playing at this venue on top of a snooker hall. And
in where was this?
It's in East London.
Okay, all right, yeah.
And these guys come in, like a firm of guys come in from Southend they were. So they've come in the party and we're just finishing up. Security's saying one more tune. And so Richie's getting ready to pack up and play the one more tune. And then this guy comes over and he goes, look, mate, do you know what I mean? Like, we've just got here, there's a few of us here, do you know what I mean? Like, just play one more tune, let's play one more tune. And Richie's like, no, mate, security's saying we've got to pack up, we've got to go. It's like, look, you know what I mean? Just one more tune, mate, one more tune. And Richie's like, mate, you know, we can't. It's like, look, I'll give you a couple of these. right? A couple of Eddies, a couple of Eddies, a couple of E's, right? Richie's like, mate, like thing is like, anyways. So there's a big firm of them, look. The security knows that they're outnumbered anyway. So we continue playing some tunes and all of that. And then when we play the last tune, the same guy turns around and says, you know what? You lot are the bollocks. You lot are coming with me. You're coming with us. And so there's me, Richie, Frankie, there's about 7 of us, 6 of us. So he was like, what? He's like, you're coming with us. So we end up driving back to Southend. We end up in this house.
Mental.
Yeah, these guys who we've just met, you know what I mean, set up 2 decks, right? Set up 2 decks, put a curtain up, put drinks in the corner, all kind of drinks, and then we're just there having a party and playing rhythms till, I don't know, I didn't get home till about Monday. Do you know what I mean? And we're just hanging out. And those people, that guy happens to be JP.
Right,
yeah. That is JP, who's Well Danced, AWOL, Clink Street, Beyond Therapy, all of these parties that people have no clue about. And so, you know, that started a beautiful, truly amazing relationship, you know, with Jay, Bonnie, Gary. There was a few of them, you know what I mean? There was a big firm of them that used to move around, and, you know, they were a strong firm, you know, probably like, what's happening, guys? You know what I mean? Like, that's them lot, do you know what I mean? and so Jay's my brother from another, man, do you know what I mean? You know, I've got nothing but love and respect for him and the crew. And, you know, I think, you know, with Jay, he's done so much contributions. He's contributed, so much to this scene, but he's so quiet and humble about it. A lot of people haven't got a clue what he's done.
Yeah, big up Jay, man.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, it sounds to me, and this is kind of like this, another sliding door moment. Imagine that.
Yeah.
He could have got there 15 minutes later.
And then it would have been a completely
You would have been gone.
We would have been gone. 10 minutes difference. We probably would have never met. We probably would have never been working together to this day. It would have, you know, like I said, the timeline would have been completely different, man.
I mean, it's a good part to ask the question then, how did you therefore get into, bearing in mind that you started off with Spoonie DJing and he was the MC.
Yeah.
How did it get that you then went, you know what, no, I'm going to MC?
I ended up, when I was going and hanging out with them lot, because I asked Richard this, I was like, Rich, I can't remember the first time I picked up the mic, you know, over that kind of music. And he said it was at Silver Lady pub on Allen Road when we was playing. And he must have said, yo, pick up the mic and say something, you know what I mean? And I'm like, what? Do you know what I mean? He's like, yeah, man, say something. And so then from that, turned into like, you know, I'm hosting and like, yeah, you know, the Shag crew and the thing, you know, because Richie could host as well. And then from that was for me, as far as I can remember, that was the start, which was at the Silver Lady pub at Allen Road in Stone Newton. And then from that was, you know, that's when the beauty started, you know what I mean? Everything, I mean, we was going everywhere and I just was picking up the mic and hosting.
So with the story you just spoke about regarding Jay and meeting him and what have you, was he already a promoter at that point?
Them lot was starting to promote.
They were starting to
Jay
promote.
was looking for warehouses. At that time, everybody was just looking for a warehouse to do things. You know what I mean? You know, there was all illegal parties. You know, Rat Pack, Everson and them lot, we all worked together. You know what I mean? We'd be over Hackney Wick, you know, in a warehouse. We'd finish like maybe Crowland Road or wherever we was. And then there's another party over there. Somebody's found a warehouse. Oh, hey, somebody's found a warehouse, you know? Yeah, let's go. Do you know what I mean? And we're all in this warehouse. Me, Richie Fingers, Frankie, Matthew B, you know, Everson, you know, Rat Pack.
Yeah, Matthew
Frankie
B,
Valentine.
Bushwhacker, for those who might not know him in that way.
A good friend of mine. He used to come to my house. You know, he was an amazing DJ from, Matthew was playing tunes from when he was a kid.
Like,
you know what I mean?
Young
you know,
little boy,
from young.
Big up Matthew, man.
Yeah, young.
He's gone on to do really well
Matthew's
for himself.
doing amazing things,
really
man.
well.
I take my hat off to him, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. The reason why I asked you about whether Jay was promoting, because I'm trying to get to lead into whether Jay was then the next sort of catalyst to elevate your career.
Yeah, I mean, we was doing our own bits and pieces, but Jay and them lot was kind of more consistent in finding warehouses, bigger warehouses and bigger spaces and stuff. because there was a few of them, there was a lot of them. And so they would find, I mean, one of the places I remember was Clink Street by London Bridge, was underneath the bridge. So he was doing Clink Street, he was doing Silver City, which was, Silver City was Tottenham, no, Wood Green that was. That was probably my first resident for them lot, which was probably about, I think 88, 89. That was my first residency. And then Crowland Road was my second residency, and I think that was 1991. And that was every weekend. And you don't leave there till 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. You come out, look at proper little Shub's place. But you'd see some people come in there, you know, Groove, Fabio, Frankie Valentine, you know, Bones, Livewire, you know, who else? Just proper artists, Rat Pack, like everybody would pass through Crowland Road. And so that was my second residency, which run for years, you know what I mean? That's like, well, I say 89, 90, I think that was 90, 91, maybe. Yeah.
Before you started doing those residencies, were there other places?
We was doing other bits and pieces. Richie and them lot was, you know, doing Stearns. JP was doing,
Stearns,
JP was doing, Jay
heck.
had Stearns before a lot of people had Stearns.
Yeah.
He was doing Stearns. So it was at Stearns.
I haven't heard that name in over 35 years.
Yeah, Stearns.
Wow.
You know, there's loads of places, man. It's like, this is, you know, this is, when I think about it, this is like 35 years, like plus.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So with those residencies under your belt now, with Silver City, now Crowland Road, 91, as I remember 91, it was actually quite an exciting time in this scene. You know, like the music was a lot more diverse, as were the clientele.
Yeah.
And for those who missed that period, you know, like it was certainly wasn't what we know now as a rave scene.
No way.
You know, like because it was almost as though every genre you could think of was combined in just one rave. Yeah.
And you'd hear a man playing that in their set, you know what I mean? All different kind of styles, a bit of house, the Suno Latino, Fast Eddie, Chub Rock, you know, just, you know, in one set, it was, you didn't know what you was going to get, but whatever you got was good.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was good.
Yeah. I mean, for you as an MC though, considering that you were now at this place, which some might have still seen without even realizing that actually the scene was changing from the acid rave scene into something else. Because by that time it was something else.
Yeah.
It wasn't the acid rave scene as we know it by 1991. And so, but for your career, I'd imagine that was changing as well, and that you were now starting to kind of like perform at other places. And the reason I'm bringing this part of your trajectory is because a lot of people think of you, when they think of you, they think about GQ, Randall, Mickey, Darren, Gachet, and everybody else at Ken at Paradise Club. But Paradise Club, for me anyway, came sometime after, although it may have just been a year later. It seemed like it was a long time later, but you tell me the trajectory.
So from Crowland Road, you know, that was running for however long. And I got to say, you know, I wasn't getting paid at any of these parties. You know what I mean? You know, the first piece of money I got was Crowland Road, where the guy, I forgot his name, Chris, I think his name was, who was running the spot, gave me £15. You know what I mean? Them time I was really doing my little hustling and thing and whatever, but it goes, I said £15. So what's that for? It goes, you're doing all that thingy bob on the mic, innit, when I talking. I said, what? I say, yo, where's the acid man there? You know what I mean? We want 2 acid and 1 ecstasy. Right, I'm in, yeah? Yeah, leaving, after we was doing Crowland Road, JP was doing like Beyond Therapy, you know, and all these kind of parties. And then for me, you could hear the music started to change. And then when it started to change, then, you know, things started to move a bit differently. You know, things are going into kind of like clubs now, you know, Laser Drums and all that was running and stuff as well. And you know, that was the beginning of when Paradise was born. And so when we've gone into Paradise now, you know, remember I'm with Richie and all of them lot now. And so downstairs is house music. You know, Richie, Roy the Roach, Frankie, I think Matthew, you know, a few of us. So forgive me for those that I forgot the names. And then I was upstairs, you know what I mean, with Kenny, them and then, you know what I mean, I'd already done my thing and was like, right, this is where I'm going, you know what I mean, this thingy bob here, you know. And so in our relationship with JP and all of the firm became really solidified and pretty solid. And, you know, everything that they did, we was, you know, we was on their shows, we was on their lineup doing their thing. And so, I mean, Jay was, he was way ahead, man. Do you know what I mean? He was so way ahead. And he's like, you know, I'm going to do some festivals. I want to do some things. And then I want to do this club night. You know, I'm thinking about doing this club night called Paradise Club, you know, and who do you think, G, like, you know what I mean? I said, oh, you know, I did this man and that man and this man. Because I introduced Mickey Finn. I introduced Jay to Mickey Finn.
Right, okay,
you know what I mean?
right, yeah.
And so I said, Jay, you know what, Mickey, you know what I mean? This man and that man and thing and whatever, you need to have them man in there. And he's like, all right, cool. And that became the birth of Paradise Club, right? You know, we all kind of knew each other. Me, Richie, the guys downstairs, the house guys, you know, we all kind of knew each other like from the scene and stuff. But now we're a collective now. You know, the birth of something really unique came out of that place, which I don't think any of us thought that was going to happen at all. We're just going in there to play music and do thing, you know what I mean, and just showcase and do what we're doing. But out of being part of this amazing firm of people, great DJs and stuff, I was getting more work abroad. And so I'm working now, getting shows in Canada, and I'm getting shows in Belfast. Because it was my residency, a lot of people were trying to book me to do other things, but I was loyal to them lot. I said, and after I'm like, I've got to do some other bits and pieces. And so, you know, I'm doing all of these things there. I'm working over this country. Now I'm in Canada. And the whole Canada thing came across because they heard a tape of me and Randall and then tape of me and Mickey Finn. And all of us, a lot of us got work because of them tapes. Right. Them tapes went all around the world.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's still fascinating how we sit here now, like, you know, all these years later, and we look about it and you go, oh, it was 30 years ago or 35 years ago. But actually the transition of the music and the scene was happening so quickly.
Yeah.
You know, and our lives were changing so quickly as well at that time, as was your career. What was going on in your personal life at that time in terms of like where you were living? You know, like I often wonder about that when the lights dim down and now you got to leave and now you're not.
When I was at Paradise Club, I was staying at Sly's house. I was back at Sly's, and Sly's a big man. Remember, you know, that man is like 15 years older than me, and so I was staying there for a few years, having loads of fun. You know what I mean? Me and him going out, doing world dance, doing all of these other big festival things, and you know, we're rolling. I'm rolling with a big man. I've got to say, for people who don't know, I used to go to this rave called Rave at the Cave. That was at Elephant and Castle. And I was probably about 16, 17 then. And Sly was doing the security. There was this blonde woman there who used to get the money, and Sly was doing the security. Sly was the original article badman, Sly. Everybody in the manor knew, that Sly don't run. Yeah? And Sly was at the door. Do you know what I mean? And Sly know me from my brothers and things. So I said, yeah, let him in, come in. You know what I mean? You know, from that to hanging about with Sly, you know what I mean? And him showing me some of the ropes and things as a big man. You know what I mean? I grew up really quickly. Do you know what I mean? Because I always was hanging about with older people.
That's the point I was making earlier, yeah.
In my lifetime, when I look at my life, like within this industry, this whole thing here, there's many segments of people that I'd moved around with. David as well, David Brennan. Do you know what I mean? My original Irish, you know what I mean? That brother, when I had no money, yeah, when I had no money, like David used to come and look after me. And David's thing is this, them times Rage was on, yeah? And David's thing's like this. Girl, I'm going to work and I'll be back. And when I come and shout you, just come. And David's work was green Adidas bag and a crowbar and leave the rest to your imagination. Right? And David will come back, at the thingy above the window there, and then we're gone. And we Rage, we're drinking champagne and ting. And then and then later on, it's like, we're going Wood Green. Wood Green used to have this shop that used to have all the 49ers, San Francisco's, you know, thingy, just be like, yeah, what you want, G? Do you know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, I want that one, I want that one, I want that one. And so I had the 49ers, San Francisco, and you had the Celtics, and we had the whole kit. And we just roll over to Rage and just like, yeah, you know, champagne and ting, and man looking like, boy, the man's flossing, but I wasn't flossing, David was flossing. You know
Big
what I
up,
mean?
David.
Yeah.
Big up, David. I know you two are close and still are.
Yeah. We're still tight,
yeah,
man.
and
Me and
still are.
David, we're tight. We're tight. Yeah.
So that period now, we're getting into now the scene where you're known as MCGQ now.
Yeah. I don't know I can't remember how I got my name, but in my head, I'm like, you know, what are you going to call yourself? And I was confident. In my mind, I'm saying, you know, girl, you're good quality, you know. When you do something, you want to do something of good quality. And then I'm like, rah, you know what I mean? So it's the GQ, that's me then. And then...
Okay, so you're known as GQ, you're in Paradise Club now, you're starting to make a name for yourself, yeah? This time now, Randall, Mickey, Darren, Gachet, Ken, you, and after a while, Fearless came in. This became a, how can I put it? Legendary status for a club night.
Yeah, it was a legendary club.
And it went on for several years, you know, like it was like a family over there. Tell me a bit about that club.
You know, it was most definitely the most uniquest family that I felt part of within playing, you know, within this music thing. We all understood each other so well. You know what I mean? There was so much respect. And every single DJ, you know, downstairs, but upstairs, you know, we was doing our thing, were really incredible at their skill. You know, they'd mastered their craft of like, this is what I do and this is me. And, you know, they came every week and people knew that. They showcased that every week. It was one of the most uniquest clubs for most cutting edge music. And there was friendly competition there. And so because there was friendly competition, every single body who came and played, even when the guests came, even when you came, you know what I mean? Everybody knows rotted boys, you have to step up. You know what I mean? Because the crowd would let you know. Do you understand what I mean? Because the crowd was so used to getting cutting edge. You know, it was dub plate mania. This man's cutting dubs like water. Mickey's coming with certain dubs. Man say, yeah, Kenny, I come with his thing now. Yeah? Gachet said, all right, he's coming with his thing now. Darren's coming with his thing then. Around was like, yeah, well, all this then. You know what I mean? And so it kept, you know, the status up in there. It kept the vibe, you know, between everybody up. Friendly competition. There was nobody who came and played rubbish in there. You must be mad. You know what I mean? The crowd would let you know. It was one of the most, for me, you know, it plays a big part in my life, man. Even though I was doing everything that I was doing before, working before at this place and that place and the thing about, but to be part of that team, it changed the whole entire of my life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, there's a time we were speaking about it, how during the time, during my absence, you and Andy became very, very close in terms of like this DJ sort of relationship, and a lot of people know of you and him.
Yeah.
But actually before that was you and Randall.
It was me and Randall. There was times it would be me and Mickey. Then it's me and Hype. You know, me and Randall. Hype, you know, I doubled up with a lot of people. You know, we'd play, we'd just fit together. And for Andy used to come to the club. Andy used to come to the club and watch Randall and everybody come and play and have good nights. Him and Scott, you know, Andy was, you know, called Youth Man Promotions. He was his young brother coming in there. And then, you know, he got really influenced, I think, by all of them guys and you know, especially Randall as well. You know, I tag team with a lot of men, but a lot of men would turn around and say the Randall and GQ tag team, that was the thing. Do you understand what I mean? And it was for a good few, for many, many years. Do you know what I mean? And then, you know, Paradise finished. Everybody was starting to doing their own thing. And then, you know, me and Andy hooked up. And then we probably worked together for maybe 12 years. Maybe 12 years, we're fitting here together, just rolling out. Do you know what I mean? Playing at some amazing festivals and shows and party. And the thing with Andy C as well is that, you know, he's a very, very unique individual. As in, like, you know, we'd be working, say if we're going to go and work and do a show somewhere, I would drive to, you know, Romford to go and meet him. And his partner, Tandy, would be like, "Go, he's in the garage." Do you know what I mean? Andy would be playing for like 4 hours. Do you know what I mean? He just would be playing like, you know, prepping himself for when he's going out to play. That guy could play if you leave him. You know what I mean? Because Andy was younger then. He would play for like 10 hours if you let him. Do you know what I mean? He was one of those people who, he just loved to play music, man. Everybody that I work with, you know, the Randalls thing, they all love to play music. You know, but Andy's a bit young, was a bit younger. But he really, you know, was one of them guys who was super passionate as well and mastered his craft, the mixing thing. But he'd all turn around and say to it was Randall that, you know, Randall influenced a lot of people with his mixing style because nobody was mixing like Randall. There was nobody mixing like Randall. Do you understand what I mean? Randall's mixing strings. There is no beat. There's just a couple of strings and he's mixing them, he's making it work. Like, I don't hear much people do that, you know? Paradise had good stock of people in there. Do you understand what I mean? And so, you know, Andy coming there and listening to what's going on in there, you know, was influencing him. Do you understand what I mean? And then he's gone and done his thing there and it was amazing at what he did. You know, we had some amazing times. We played at festival that never ever had that kind of drum and bass music before. And I'm like, right, what are we gonna do here? And we're like, well, we're gonna make it work. Do you know what I mean? We're gonna make this thing work.
Yeah, give me an example, like, of somewhere that
So
you can
I'll give you an
remember
example.
that kind of.
Yeah, so okay, so we get booked to do this festival in Serbia called Exit Festival. I think it's 2009. Yeah, 2009, a little bit earlier. Anyway, we get booked. This festival is a massive festival, like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people. We get to the airport, they pick us up, they bring us to the hotel. Anyway, Andy's in his room, I'm in my room, I'm having some food, I turn on the TV. And on the TV, they're showing the festival. And so I'm watching the festival. And they're on the main stage. And it's Billy Idol, right? And I know Billy Idol was kind of like Elvis Presley, like thing. It was a big deal, Billy Idol. You know, white wedding, no one's I mean, big deal, Billy Idol. So anyway, I'm watching them going, right, look at this thing here, boy. In my mind, I'm like, thousands of people here. And I'm like, man, mashing up the thing. And it's, you know, it's full band, drummer, guitarist thing, you know what I mean? Full stage is full, you know. So I'm like, wow. So I'm looking at this thing going, right, Billy boy, you're mashing up the thing, you know. Anyway, get a call. Driver's waiting for you downstairs. So, all right, cool. So go downstairs, me and Andy go downstairs. The driver's taking us to the festival. And they're like, okay, this way, you know what I mean? So we're walking through the festival. We've got a minder and everything, we're walking to the festival. So we're walking now. I can hear some drum and bass thing there, some jungle thing over there. And so we're walking, and I'm saying to Andy, like, I think we're going the wrong, but where are we going, mate? Like, I'm sure, like, let's follow the music over there. So I'm saying to the guy, yo, like, where are we going? He said, oh, just follow me, you know what I mean? So anyway, we're walking. When we realise we get to the main stage, we walk up the stairs, we're on the same stage as Billy Idol. And Billy Idol's performing, he's on the floor, dropping down, tearing up in his t-shirt. I think the people are going mad. And I'm like, Ross, why are we here? What's it? Because I said to the guy promoter, mate, I think we're at the wrong stage. He said, no, we play after him. I said, I've looked at Andy, Andy's looked at me, and I'm like, it's the first time I've nearly shit myself. I said, what? Right? He goes, no, you play. I said, no, mate, there must be a mix-up. And then he's like, guys, there must be a mix-up. I think we're at the wrong stage. Like, and he said, no, you play on this stage, you two. And I'm saying to myself, what the, you know what I mean? So then in my head, I'm psyching up myself because I'm saying, boy, Gary, like, you know, I'm having a proper chat with myself. I'm like, I've never done anything this big in my life and going on after this kind of performer, right? At that stage of my life in this scene. So Billy Idol's there, he's rolling on the floor, he's tearing up his shirt, the women are screaming, they're all going mad, the guitarist is the drummer's doing the drumming, flinging the sticks up in the air, and I'm looking at Andy, we're both just shitting ourselves thinking, rotted, really? So anyway, he does the last tune. They start, and then, you know, there's the 10 minutes where they got to move so they're moving all of the guitars and the drums and things, and the next thing you know, they just roll out some decks and give me a microphone and like, yeah, go. And I'm like, what the, like, how am I, you know what I mean? And then I've said to myself in my head, Gary, this is a sink or swim situation, yeah? This is the tester for you here. Are you gonna make this happen and you know, understand what you're about? Because this is the moment where you either shine or you floppadopolis. You know what I mean? You choose. And I'm like, rah, you know what I mean? And it's quiet because remember they're doing the changeover, so there's no music. And so at that time, the Pendulum tune was out. And in my head, obviously that tune has got some dog whistle underneath it, that tune there, yeah? Because anytime I play it, people say, ah, and I'm like, I don't know what he's done with that tune there, you know? Because anytime we play that tune, people start going nuts. So anyway, they give me the mic, and just before Andy starts, there's some American crew there. And they're like, man, we know who you are, man. And I'm like, what? You know who we are? I'm like, all right then, right? So then, you know, I come on and I'm like, yo, you know, Exit Festival, it's an honor, it's a privilege, and it's a pleasure to be here right now, especially to play after, like, you know, such a legend, like, I was just waffling. You understand what I mean? And we say, anyway, we're going to give you something different. I took a little shot brand and we say, all right, then, let me go then. I said, I'm going to give you something different right about now. And then Andy starts with the Pendulum tune there. And like I said, that tune got the dog whistle because as soon as he played that tune there, you just see the crowd go like that. And I looked at Andy and I said, Andy, we got them. You know what I mean? And then we started and thinking, but when from that, we just started doing like, didn't start, but ended up flying and doing some amazing shows together.
I'm going to come back to this conversation about you and Andy because clearly it was a big part of your career.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
For both of us.
And for both of you, exactly. But as you just mentioned about festivals and the number of people playing there and whatever, I just wanted to kind of give like a little context to the world dances and the lid airports and things like that, where in a way they were the very first.
They were the very first for that. You know, they were the very first for that kind of dance music, all of that. Do you understand what I mean? You know, the other festivals that we're talking about now, there's loads of different genres of thing, but world dance and all of those festivals focused on, you know, jungle, drum and bass, hardcore and stuff, which is all makes up, you know, the one genre. And so, you know, for me, they were kind of like the leaders, but, you know, you had, before that, if you go right back, you had the biologies, the energies and stuff.
Yeah, but they were acid rave.
Yeah, they were acid. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? I didn't want to make it sound like, you know.
No, that they were before them, and that's fair play. But
you have to show love to all of them.
Yeah, of course. You know, like all of those guys, Jarvis and
all of them.
Tarquin and Tony Colson, they were all people, you know what I mean? Sorry, there was a bunch of other people who I may have forgotten, but
that was at that time.
Yeah.
So, but, you know, world dance concentrated on now, do you know what I mean, on the now, which was that style of music at the time there. And so you know, you got to show love to JP and the team because them that was innovators. You know, Jay was always ahead, thinking of the Dome in London. You know, when that first built, we had something going on in there. It's like he always had his thing. I'm like, Jay, what's happening? Well, I'm just trying to sort this out, girl. You know what I mean? I think it can happen. I'm not sure, but I'm going to make it. You know me, okay? I'm going to make it work. Do you know what I mean? And he would just make things work, man.
You know, through this journey of yours as an MC and whatever, it's. I mean, a lot of people listening to this. A lot of people who not listening to this, who are just looking at you as somebody, as an MC. They kind of like they forget the fact that actually you're just like a normal guy. You know what I mean, right? And with that, I remember when you came to me and were like, oh, you know, Bianca's pregnant. I'm gonna have a baby.
Yeah.
All right. This is right in the middle of kind of like you're about to now, you know what I mean, start to. It wasn't the full trajectory, but it was enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How did that impact on your career, knowing now that, hold on a minute, I'm about to be a father, and where was you mentally with that?
I mean, that was the best news I ever got in my life. Do you know what I mean? I remember that when I got that, I was sitting in a cafe on Holloway Road. Kiss FM was there, and I was going to go and do an interview. I can't remember who it was with, but I was in the cafe, and Bianca called me and she said, "Oh, I've got some news." And I'm like, "Yeah, what's that?" And while I was eating this sandwich, she goes, "I'm pregnant." And I'm like, "What? I'm going to have a baby?" You know what I mean? I'm shutting down the whole of the cafe now. And so then I get into, now when I go to do the interview across the road at Kiss, I'm hyped up. I'm like, I'm gonna have a baby. I'm having a baby. You know what I mean? So I get in, I'm so excited. The person's there interviewing me and they're like, "Oh, so we've got GQ." And I'm like, "Yo, I'm having a baby," you know? Before they even start anything, I'm like, yeah, so, you know, having Imani, you know, it changed my life in respects of, you know, I'm going to be a dad now and I want to be a good dad. And it made me work even harder. And at that time as well, I was going to America a lot, was touring. Me and Andy was touring, me and Hype was touring, going to America, going to Canada. And so it just inspired me because I wanted to be, I just wanted to be a good dad. And I didn't want my child to have to worry about, you know what I mean, about anything. You know, and so it's my first child. You know, I have my son as well, my boy. Do you know what I mean? But you know, with Imani, I'm like, you know, with Imani, I'm like, okay, this little girl. You know what I mean? I have to try and it's first time being a father to like, you know, like my little girl and stuff, and I'm you know, like, you know what I mean? How do I maneuver? It's new, but what it imprinted in my head was like, you're gonna have to work harder, G. You're gonna have to be, you know, you're gonna have to turn up your game a little bit. You're gonna have to be a certain way. You know, I just wanted to try and be the best father that I could with just learning the ropes of being a dad.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I know the journey, you know what I mean? I know the journey and I know like the things you've been through and whatever, but you know, to others out there who have had children or, you know what I mean, in the careers, wherever their careers be, whether in the creative industry or otherwise, you know, managing relationships,
Yeah.
managing parenthood, managing finances, managing
Especially within,
ego,
yeah,
you know,
especially within this scene,
yeah.
because it's not a normal life that you're living. You know, you're out on the road a lot. You know, you're not doing a 9 to 5. You know, maybe during the week you're in the studio thing or whatever, but you know, you're constantly out. This is how you make your money. You know, some normal people have got a normal job, you know, say normal job, but a different type of job, which we all know would be like, you know, it's 9 to 5. You go to work, you come back, you spend time with the family and thing. My thing's that I'm always out on the road. You know, weekends I want to do things with my kid, but I know I have got to go and work and make some money. And so,
Do you
you
think
know,
that therefore then pay the price?
yeah, most definitely. But, you know, it's a lot of pressure, but you try your best to do your best. So, you know, it took its toll on the relationship and stuff and whatever. But, you know, we're all good, man. Amazing friends. You know, we're still family. You know, it couldn't work out any more beautiful than it has, because, you know, you know my partner of now. And so my partner of now and the mother of my child, you know what I mean? We all get on, you know, and it's a beautiful dynamics. And so, you know, I just thank God, you know what I mean, and the universe for allowing that to be like that, you know, and that there is no bitterness, you know? So, yeah, man.
You know, I said I was going to come back to the conversation about the relationship and the working relationship and the, you know, like the general relationship between you and Andy, yeah? You know, in my absence from the scene, you had formed this sort of like duo.
Yeah.
And by the time I'd come back, it was already over.
Yeah.
Tell me, in your own words, what it was that kind of like shifted that, in your opinion, made it that you didn't want to be that MC anymore?
It's a bit of a touchy subject in some respects. And, you know, I still have the most love and respect and stuff for Andy, you know, and them guys over there. But sometimes, you know, people want to do different things. Do you know what I mean? And so, you know, we're working together. We've created this crazy, you know, Andy wasn't just a guy that I worked with. That was my friend. Do you know what I mean? You know, I'd sit at Andy's house, you know what I mean? The kids swimming in the pool. Imani's there with the kids running about, you know what I mean? We was tight. Do you know what I mean? As far as I'm concerned, nobody could have troubled Andy at that time. You know, you had people who was like, you know what, yeah, my man and this and that. I said, you can't do him nothing, bruv. You can't do him nothing. That's my people. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna call out the man's name. You know what I mean? But man's like, you know, my man thing. But I said, listen, man, I don't want to get in nothing, but you ain't gonna do him nothing. Yeah, trust me. What do you mean? I said, I'm telling you, you're not gonna do him nothing. It's my people. Do you understand what I mean? You know, 'cause I know Andy's not confrontational. He's not that guy. And so you want to try and take advantage of him because he's not that guy and thing like that. I'm like, no way. And so I back Andy all the way. Do you know what I mean? And so, you know, our relationship wasn't just you know, playing music relationship. There was a lot of depth.
I can imagine it would be, because you're traveling together.
We're traveling together. We're eating food together. We're laughing. We're joking. We've done some.
I can imagine it
things.
wouldn't be. I mean, and then you just go your separate ways.
No,
it seemed a
wasn't.
bit unusual.
Yeah, you know, there were some things that, do you know what I mean? You know, we agreed on and we disagreed on, and you know, I loved Andy. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's my guy. He's still my guy. Do you know what I mean? But we just wanted different things. You know, you're playing a certain style of music. That's your thing there. You know, I come from where, you know, you've decided to change how you play. You know what I mean? And that's good for you. You know, but I'm that person who likes, you know, the thing. You was playing the thing before, but then you know, you're changing your style of music. You know, you're playing to a bigger audience, a much even bigger audience that we was playing at. And you know what I mean? You know, you're playing a different style. I respect that. You know, so let's keep our friendship. You know, when you do your thing and then I do our thing, and then we'll meet somewhere in the middle when we see each other and we're still cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that was that.
Okay. Yeah, I know that there's no love lost there between you both, you know what I mean? And I know that, you know, for what it's worth, there's loads of people out there that would remember those times fondly.
Of course.
Yeah, you know?
I mean, you know, we had the best times. Do you understand what I mean? We're there, we're in America. You know, we got stories, man. Do you know what I mean? We got stories where we've been in situations like, what the hell are we doing here? This redneck town, you know what I mean? In some suburbs where the promoter's saying, hey man, where you going, man? I said, yeah, I want to go and get a little drink, innit? A little Mountain Dew. He goes, nah, man, you know what I mean? You can't go. I said, what are you talking about? We don't come from that. You understand? So I'm like, I said, yo, you know what? And I sit in the car, you go and get the petrol station and get your thing and come out. Let's get out of it, get to the airport so we can get out of this state, bruv. You know what I mean? Because this is off key out here, you know what I mean? You know, so, you know, we had some amazing times, man. We really, really did, you know what I mean? And, you know, Andy's still there doing his thing. You know, I take my hat off to him, you know what I mean? He's you know, still consistent in you know, and still passionate about, you know, what he does in playing. And so, you know, I've got nothing but love for him, man. Do you understand what I mean?
Yo, you know, at the very beginning, we spoke about your family being from St Lucia. We spoke about, you know, like, well, we spoke off camera, actually, about both your parents, actually, your mum and your dad. And how fond you are of St Lucia, and
home,
I mean the fact that you go there quite regularly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know that your mum and your dad both kind of immigrated back to. Is that the right word? Immigrated back?
You can
But
use
they
that.
went back to live in St Lucia. How was that for you and for them? And the reason, you know, I'm leading with this line of questioning.
So they decided to go back, and I was really kind of a little bit like, you know, I didn't want them to, but then I was like, you know, you've worked so hard, go and live out the rest of your life and stuff. And so they've moved back to St Lucia. You know, I'm a bit skeptical about it, just because I'm not going to be able to go to my mum and dad's house in London and see them. Anyway, they get to St Lucia, and then I go over to go and see them, and I see my parents, my mum and dad, in this, you know, new love situation, like youngsters again, which I hadn't seen for years. I'm like, wow. You know, and I'm looking, and, you know, they're dancing and thing in the kitchen. My mum, you know, my dad's like, yo, come here, Rose. You know, music's playing and they're doing it. And I'm like, bro, this place is coming, ignited you guys again. And so that thought that I had in my head when they was leaving, you know, like the sadness and thing or whatever, when I've gone to see them in the new house, I'm like, you guys are good. Do you know what I mean? And so I was so happy. And then, you know, unfortunately, they was there for 2.5 years, and then my dad randomly got sick, got a phone call from mum and said, your dad's not well. I'm like, what do you mean dad's not well? I just left his lot. She said, dad's not well. He's gone to the hospital. So he's gone to the doctors, and then they said he's got to go to the hospital. So I said, all right, mum. So then me and Nana, my girlfriend, was like, okay. I said, mum, you know what? We're going to come over and I'll bring dad back to London for a little bit so he can get like a checkup and thing. That was, it, you know, in my mind. So me and Nana, we fly out to St Lucia and get to my mum. My cousin picks me up and says, Cal, uncle's not good, you know, dad's not good. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I just left him like a few months ago. What are you talking about? Anyway, we drive back to mum's house. Mum's kind of like broken in pieces. I'm like, mum, what's actually going on? She goes, Gary, I don't know. Your dad was there and then thing, and then started getting skin and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, anyway, all right then. I said, well, tomorrow I'm going to go to the hospital anyway. So I go to the hospital the following day, me and Nana, and I see my dad, and I'm like, I couldn't even comprehend what was going on. Do you know what I mean? I was like, and the hospital that hospital was in was a shit hospital. Do you know what I mean? You know, I would say contributing to that hospital, you know. Anyway, so I'm looking at my dad and I'm trying to find the information, and, you know, it's slow coming back, the information and stuff. And then my dad just looking really, you know, sick and stuff. And I'm like, what's going on? I'm saying, no, what's going on? Because in my mind, I'm coming over there to bring my dad back to London. I just left him a few months ago. Like, how they got to this stage where he's like that in the bed, I don't know. Anyway, you know, we're at the house. Me and Nana's at the house with my mum. You know, we're just waiting. Every minute we're waiting for phone calls and stuff. Like, yeah, what's going on? I'm phoning with Dad. Yeah, we're just in that, blah, blah, blah. They want to do a biopsy. So they said they want to do a biopsy. And so they want to do a biopsy. They don't have the needle to do the biopsy. So my mum's had to go to another hospital to buy a needle, to bring it back to this hospital, to give it to them for them to do a biopsy. By that time, my dad was like nil by, you know, they do nil by mouth. So he hadn't ate for so long. And so I'm saying to myself, this hospital here, what kind of, you know what I mean? Even I'm looking at my dad, I'm like, my dad don't look well. Because, you know, if I'm honest, when I went in there to see my dad, when I first got there, I ran out of the hospital and was in tears, and then had to compose myself and go back into the hospital because I could not comprehend what was going on. So then, you know, we're at the house anyway, we're just waiting for information what's going on and thing, blah, blah, blah. I'm saying to my brothers, yo, you need to come, you know, the man's not well, you know. And so, you know, we're there for about a week, he's in the hospital and whatever. And then they just say they're discharging him. You know, and I'm just dealing with some ignorant doctors and stuff. I'm like, what do you mean you discharge him? You're not even telling us like what's going on and thing, whatever. And so my dad comes home and I said, you know what, anyway, it's better he comes home because we look after him and that. And in my head, I'm just like, we're going to just take dad home. I'm going to give him some protein shakes, nutriment things, get him on the plane and get him back. And so, you know, dad's at home and I'm looking at my dad and I'm like, boy, Gary, this don't look good, you know, that don't look thing, but my brain is trying to process all of these things. And then I'm like, my dad's in pain. They've given him the wrong tablets. Supposed to give him like morphine tablets. They're giving him like fucking Panadol or something like that, right? And I'm like, rah. So, you know, my mum it's hard for her to process. Someone said, Mum, don't worry about it. We're going to take care of it. So I'm here, you know what I mean? I'm there. My cousins are all by the bedside and we're all looking after him and stuff. And I'm looking at my dad and looking at my dad. And my dad's getting skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. And in my mind, I'm still like, I'm going to take my dad home. I ain't going to go and think, my dad's coming home. Do you know what I mean? And then I had to say to myself, I'm like, Gary, is your dad dying? But you can't, you're not willing to process this. And in my mind, I'm saying to myself, but I was here like a few months ago, like, but it doesn't make sense. Nothing makes sense. And so, you know, we're day and night, you know, we're around the bed and looking after him. My mum is just like, not great. And so it's Thursday now. We're all taking shifts, looking after him and stuff. I'm sleeping on the floor and thing like that and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, my dad was a man's man, do you know what I mean? And I'm saying, Dad, you want to go toilet? And he's like, yeah. And he's not talking, bro. He's like, yeah. And I'm like, all right. So I am physically lifting up my dad. My dad now is like this, his bones. His wrist and his arms are like that. And so I'm lifting up my dad, as fragile as he is, and carrying my dad to the toilet. And then I'm holding my dad while he's peeing, and he's still trying to have that man thing about him. Like, and I said, Dad, you finished? And he's like, yeah. And then my dad comes back into my arms, and I carry my dad. And I've had to be so gentle the way I laid my dad down on the bed, because in my mind, I'm feeling like his bones would break. And so I'm trying to process all of these things. Like, I'm like, you know, I'm talking to God. I'm like, boy, God, help me out here. I don't know what's going on. I need some help. Give me some strength and thing and whatever, whatever. And then on the Saturday night, something happens in my head. And I say, God, I don't know what's going on here. No, before that, on the Saturday night, I'm talking to my dad. I'm trying to talk to him. He can't talk now. And I'm saying, Dad, I don't know. I'm saying, Dad, I don't know how to handle this right now. And I'm saying to him, I'm saying to him, Dad, I don't know what to do. And I say, Dad, I don't know what to do. And we have this conversation where he's looking at me and I'm looking at him, and he's not talking, but he's saying, I know what he's saying. He's saying, it's all right, son. And I'm saying to him, Dad, this is not all right, because I'm not ready for this, because I don't know what's going on. And then after that, you know, my mum comes in the room, and there's this moment where I'm sitting here like that. He's on the bed, and my mum's holding his head. And she's like, Derek, don't leave me. And that was probably the saddest moment in my life. I had to witness that. And so then after that, I've gone in the other room in my bedroom and I've said, you know what, God, whatever you're going to do, just do it quick. If you're going to leave him here, then give us a miracle. And if you're going to take him, then just do it quickly and just put him out of his pain. And the following day, Sunday morning, the priest came round, and you know, when they do like the last rites and stuff, and there's like, you know, Derek, is there anything that you want to, is there anything that you want to think, you know what I mean? And Mum was like, you know, and I say to myself, boy, Dad, even you sick like that, you still ain't gonna go and, you know what I mean? You're still sitting, you still ain't gonna say your things or whatever. So then I say, Dad, I'm gonna go to the airport because my brothers are coming. I'm gonna go and pick up my brothers and my sister. I said, I'm gonna go and pick up Roy, Sammy and Sharon, and then I'm coming. And he's just going like that, I'm like, all right. So I drive to the airport. Remember, you know, I ain't shaved, I ain't cut my hair and thing, piece of ears there, piece of beard and thing and whatever. So I get to the airport, I pick up Roy, Sammy and Sharon, my stepsister, and I said, well, we have to go. Do you know what I mean? And so then we go, and we drive back. And Roy's like, why can't we stop and get a little one juice? Because we always, when we go to St Lucian, we always stop on the way back and have a juice by this bar, which is on the sea. So I'm like, well, we ain't got time. You know, he's like, please, Jesus, all right then. And in my mind, I'm like, that was God's way of me not seeing what was going to happen next. So anyway, we have this drink. 5 minutes, say, let's go. So I drive back fast, and then we get to my mum's house. And this time there's loads of people in my mum's garden. And as soon as I pulled up in the car, I just hear this scream, this really loud scream of my mum screaming. And so, you know, I jump out the car and I run into the house, and then I go into the bedroom, and my old man had just died and I just missed out. And so I'd missed him by about 4 minutes. And I believe that I wasn't really supposed to see that. You know what I mean? See him take his last breath. You know, my mum's crying in the bathroom, all of these people around the bed, they're all crying, like all the family and stuff. And I'm just there with him while he's there in the bed. And I'm just like, my sister's going like that. She can't comprehend that he's gone. And so I'm just stroking his head. And I'm like, you know what, Dad, no more pain. Do you know what I mean? No more pain, no more pain. You're okay now. And then that was that. And then, you know, there was the funeral, and in the West Indies, things are completely different. I didn't really like the way how my dad got buried at all. I didn't like the thing the church pastor forgot my dad's name, wanted to go and fling the chair in the churchman's face, in the pastor's face. It was like, you know, it left me, you know, we got knocked for a couple of things. There was some of these little things to me that really hurt me so deeply. Do you know what I mean? And I came back to London. You know, I stayed with my mum for a little while. And then I came back to London, and I remember, like, I needed money. Do you know what I mean? I needed money. So I came back to try and do a gig, just so I can get some money, then go back to St Lucia. And I came back to London, I had to do this gig in Manchester. I can't remember who it was with, but I remember it was for Wilf. And so I go and do this gig, first gig back. It was with Marky, actually. And so I'm at the hotel, and I'm saying to myself, Gary, what are you doing here? You just left your mum, he does this thing. And I'm saying, I need money to get some money so I can go back to my mum's and, you know, I'm trying to help out and stuff. Anyway, I try and do the gig. And 20 minutes into doing the gig, you know, because this is how we get paid. You have to front it and pretend even when things are not good. And so I'm doing the gig, 20 minutes, and then I just start crying, bawling and stuff. And then I have to go to the side of the stage, and I can't manage. And Wolf goes, you know what, G, you know what I mean, just go back to the hotel and stuff. And so I go back to the hotel, and I think to myself, God, am I going to get paid? You know what I mean? Because I didn't do the gig. Do you know what I mean? I didn't finish doing the gig. So anyway, I wake up in the morning, I go to the train station, and as I'm going to the train station, and I need some money, do you know what I mean? I've got to go back and help my mum, I need some money and stuff and whatever. I get a call from SP. And SP calls me, and he goes, G. And I'm like, what's up, bro? And he goes, listen, you know what I mean? He goes, do you know what I mean? It goes, I know you're a strong man, and I know, you know, you don't take anything from nobody. He goes, while he was in St Lucia with your dad, looking after your dad and that, I ended up doing some of your gigs. They moved some of the gigs my way. And I'm like, yeah, what's up? And he goes, but I want to give you some money. Do you know what I mean? For the gigs and stuff. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you did the gigs and all that. He goes, yeah, I know. Because, you know, they were your gigs. Do you know what I mean? And you was away taking care of that, you know, taking care of things. I said, don't be silly, man. And he goes, no, G, do you know what I mean? He goes, I know you would never ask, you know what I mean? Like, he goes, I know you've been away, you hadn't been working, he was taking care of that. And I said, don't worry about that, S, man. I said, don't worry, you know what I mean? By the time I got from Manchester to London, I heard my phone ping, which was my bank account. My man had put a piece of money in there for me. SP had put some money in there for me, which helped me to go back to St Lucia and sit down with my mum again and chill out with my mum and just be there for her and stuff until other things, you know, I started to work at set back in and stuff, and you know, people owed me money, thing, whatever. And so, you know, I'll never forget that. You know what I mean? You know, I love SP. I loved SP before that. Do you know what I mean? But when he did that, because I've said to him, don't, yes, it's fine, don't worry about it. He goes, I know you're a proud man, G. I said, yeah, I said, don't worry about that, you know, and I'm fronting, because in my head, I'm like, I got to find some money. And by the time I get back, my man's put money in my account. And with that, I bought my flight and I went straight back to St Lucia, sat down with my mum for a little while. And then we brought her back to London. And then we had to start this new life without the old man there. And I was very angry and different. I think that whole experience, I've been through many experiences in my life and seen death. You know, I've been chased with certain things and all of that from man, and I've seen stuff you do when you're growing up. But when you see something which is totally out of your control and you can do nothing about it, it changes your mindset. It kind of makes you become somebody different. Do you know what I mean? And witnessing something which I was never expecting to happen at all, and had to watch it like that, see somebody near enough disintegrate into, you know, just like bones and stuff. You know, it does its thing. And made me even a bit more tougher and more resilient. You know, and so all eyes was on mum to make sure mum was all right, you know, to watch mum go through pain with this life partner that she had. She was just starting a new, you know, new life in St Lucia. They didn't even get to 3 years. And then this thing has happened. It was the most saddest thing for me to see and witness. And it crushed me. Do you know what I mean? I didn't cry for a year, then saw a bereavement counsellor, spoke to a bereavement counsellor, and she said 2 things. I don't know what she said. I bawled for about half hour. And then nearly had a nervous breakdown about it. Managed to sort myself out, because I think what had happened is that within that year, I've seen what I saw. You know, the whole thing of watching the old man like that, which came from nowhere, and into being buried in a way that I was like, you know, it's another country, it's the West Indies. If you know West Indies, then you know what possible could happen over there. But I was just like, you know, it left me scarred, man. Do you know what I mean? It left me scarred. And so, you know, it changed the way I looked at things. It changed the way I looked at life. And, you know, to just be grateful for the smallest things. Do you understand what I mean? After seeing that and saying, boy, 1 minute you're there and we're there laughing and joking and thing, you know, I'd come to St Lucian, my dad would pick me up from the airport and be like, "Dave, son, I've got a look of weed." You know what I mean? I'm like, "Dad, where you get it from?" You know, and so I'm saying we had that relationship, you know what I mean? And then to this man being there who you know, raised me. Do you understand what I mean? You know, that's not you say he's my stepdad, but it's just, you just know him as, you just the only man that you've seen. So, you know, he took care of me, he looked after me. And for him all of a sudden to just not be there, it kind of like, it did kind of, you know, made me feel a certain way.
You said just now about, you know, like the consequence of being that you had like a nervous breakdown, but at the same time, after that and the therapy and where you are now, you know, that has that kind of like given you some resilience, because I know that since then you've had more challenges. Nothing maybe that might not touch the sides comparison to your dad, but still.
Yeah, what I understood from going through that, right? to do with my dad and watching that, because a year later, my uncle, my dad's brother, he died a year later and had to go. I was in St Lucia, and that happened when he was there. I was trying to mend myself. Do you know what I mean? And then while I'm there, my uncle's sick, who helped me to bury my dad, his brother, the year before. And then he's died while I'm there. And I'm sitting down with him a few days later, stroking his head. You know what I mean? And so there was so much going on. You know, I think you have no choice, but you either fold or you become solid. Do you understand what I mean? And my thing is like I can't fold. You know what I mean? I have to try and be solid. I can't allow, you know, I'm witnessing and going through things which, if you're talking to somebody, when I was talking to the bereavement counsellor about it, you could see in her face, she was looking like, what? And so I was dealing with some serious stuff, but in my head, I'm like, it's going to be all right, girl. You've got to go through this thing. You didn't grieve. You didn't cry for a year because you're watching them bury this man. They put the coffin in the wrong way, you know. You know, when I talk to people about it now, I can laugh about it now in some aspects, you know what I mean? Because it's like a Benny Hill thing. Do you know what I mean? They're putting the coffin the wrong way down in the thing, you know. My mum said, the man's already dead, you're trying to kill him again. You know what I mean? You know, so the thing in the coffin, it was so much things that I'd never, I'm telling you, it was like a movie, bro. And I can only laugh about it now because I'm in that headspace where I can laugh about it.
How was that while that was all going on? You said about, obviously you came back that time and you did that event with Wilf and whatever. And you know what I mean, you weren't able to get through it, you know?
Yeah.
So you've gone back to the West Indies, but you've got to come back and work again.
Yeah.
And like you said, you've got to be in a position where you're like having fun and pretending. And I mean, I suppose that's the same with everybody. You've got to go back to work at some point. You've got to go and act at some point in a movie. You've got to come back and sing a song if you're an artist or an entertainer or a DJ or whatever. You know, like you've been through that and some with your dad, your uncle, one of your best friends with Randall.
Yeah.
How do you get through that as a somebody who, you know, you can't take time off? There's no bereavement sort of like, what's the word? What do they call it? Grief, time off or whatever. How do you manage when that happens?
Like, you know, if I look at it now, right? So, like I said before, I think you have no choice sometimes. You either fold or you try and strong it out. And I've had so much people pass away, do you know what I mean? The whole Randall situation, like I was with Randall on the Sunday, and then, you know what I mean? You know, he was in my room, he was talking, and then, you know, I'm like, give me a shout when you get back. He's like, yeah, no problem, you know, message me because he had to have dialysis. And then on the Tuesday or the Wednesday, I get a call from Goldie just crying down the phone. I'm like, what's the matter? And he's like, Randall. And he's like, yeah, what about Randall? I just left him. He's like, Randall's gone. I'm like, gone where? He's like, he's gone, G. And I just put down the phone, do you know what I mean? And I'm saying to myself, before Randall, it was somebody else. And then after Randall, you know, it was Fats. You know what I mean? Everybody's thinking about Fats. And then after Fats, it was somebody else. And then it was this thing. And then it was Randall. It was about maybe 5 people to the lie that passed away in that time there. I was getting messages from people and I couldn't even
have time to think the first one.
The first one. And I'm saying to myself, till I started to get paranoid and get scared and say, well, what's going on out there? Like everybody's just kind of like, what's happening? And then while that was happening with friends and stuff, you know, then there was family that I was getting called from. And I'm like, rah, this is really testing. And I'm saying, you know what, God, my shoulders are broad, but they're not that broad, you know. I don't know how much thing I can take, but, you know, I trust in you to give me some guidance and be able to like get me through this. Do you understand what I mean? Which he always does. And the thing is that with this game that we're in, that we work in, there is no sick pay. Do you know what I mean? So whatever you're going through, it doesn't matter. You got to go and work or you sit at your yard. But I ain't got time to sit at my yard. I've got things to take care of. You know what I mean? I've got family to take care of. I've got bills to take care of. So I have to go out there and try and be as resilient as I can in order to get through. That doesn't mean to say, you know, you know the saying they say like everybody's an actor. You know what I mean? But some are great actors. Do you know what I mean? We all have to be actors when we need to be, because we, you know, within this game, no matter what you're going through, if you got to go and work, you got to go and work. You got to go on the stage, and you got to turn your thing on, and do what you got to do. You know, I've had to do that many a times when I'm feeling the most pain. Do you know what I mean? I'm feeling that every time I'm going out every week, and Randall's not there. You know what I mean? And I'm working with certain people, and I don't feel the same again when I'm working out there, because I'm like, my guy's not there. Do you know what I mean? He's not there. Do you understand what I mean? Randall triggers me. We had a rapport. Me and Andy had a rapport, but me and Randall's got this rapport that he will just look and go like, and I'm like, right, you know what? I know what's coming. And so then I have to be on my game. You know what I mean? You know? And so there is no time to sleep in this thing here. You know, no matter what's going on, you know, our job is that you go out and you perform and you get through it and you do what you can do. It doesn't mean invincible, you know. You know what I mean? What it means, like, you have to do what you do. But what I've learned from all of that, especially when my old man passed away, when I was having a really rough time trying to process everything, you know what I mean? I started meditating and stuff. I was just doing meditation. I just started doing meditation and mindfulness before this woman that I know called Jane, quite, you know, older lady, was doing that for years. And I said, you know what, Jane, I want to learn how to meditate. I want to calm thing, you know, whatever. And she goes, Gary, come with me. And she took me to this place, mindfulness course. And I went and done this course thing. And I was in this room and I thought, well, I'm in here with a bunch of nutters. You know what I mean? At first, that arrogance that I had, you know what I mean? And then I sat there and then the woman was talking. And then I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool, this is, you know what I mean? And then you do all of these kind of like things and stuff. And I'm like, all these practices, sorry. And I'm like, this is actually really, really cool. And the more I did it, I could see that I was changing. And then my dad passed away. And then I was like, right, I really need to start doing this again. And so that kind of got me through it. You know, I had to just reprogram my brain differently because I was in so much pain and so much hurt. And, you know, I found my way. Do you know what I mean? I found my way. I started, you know, doing more meditation. I was doing more gratitude, you know, things to be grateful for. Could be the smallest thing. Do you understand what I mean? Because we forget that even though we're in certain situations and things are happening, and that, you know, be grateful for, you know, whatever it is, like you've seen, you know, what it taught me is always like to be grateful for seeing this person today, because it made me realize that person today, you might not see them tomorrow, Gary. Do you know what I mean? You know, I had to go through that and understand that. And so it kind of rebooted my brain, how I looked at things. And so I, you know, practiced more meditation, I practiced more gratitude. I went to, you know, done some practices and stuff. And, you know, just to calm me, you know what I mean, when I was feeling a certain way and stuff.
You're probably one of the most versatile in terms of events that you play at, or diverse events that you play at as an MC.
Yeah.
You play across a number of different types of events and what have you. And, you know, since coming back to the scene, when I first came back, which I'd say was around about 2018,
Yeah.
I didn't recognize it.
Yeah.
I didn't recognize it because of the type of music that I was listening to, the type of music that wasn't being played anymore. You know, it was pretty much unrecognizable because of a lot of the new talent and names that were around that I didn't know.
Right.
You know, it was a scene that I'd been away for over nearly coming up a couple of decades, you know, in that way. So coming back into it, seeing that you were still playing at quite a diverse range of shows.
Yeah.
Knowing that, you know, like you're a conscientious person and whatever, I gave it a chance. You know what I mean? I gave it a chance and decided, let me kind of like have a little look and a study and whatever. And frankly, although there are those who would say, oh, it's all gone to this or it's all this, that and the other, I'm encouraged by over the last sort of like 5 years maybe, of how the music is kind of like coming round into something that I kind of like am excited about actually.
Right. What are you asking me then?
I'm asking you, what do you think about that?
First and foremost, yeah, I love this music with all my heart. Do you know what I mean? I'm so passionate about it. From the age of 16, you know, to the age of 50 plus right now, you know, I've been in it. And so I'm passionate, maybe more than most. Do you understand what I mean? And I think that it's a very unique scene. It's very special, very, very special. But I also think, you know, my thing is always about balance. Do you know what I mean? If there's that, then, you know, like that. Make the clock swing. Do you understand what I mean? And I don't think that it's 100% balanced. Like, you know, look, you know, I understand about change. You know, it's inevitable. Do you understand what I mean? And it's a good thing. But I just think sometimes when we're talking about music quality control and stuff, of course there's going to be the commercial aspect of it and that. And that's all cool on that. But my thing is like, all I can do is give you truths and facts, right? 35 years. I've seen this scene when it was Chicago house to acid house to breaks to thing to jungle, then drum and bass. You call it intelligent, they might call it for relevant, they might call it still relevant, whatever they want to think. I watched the whole thing of it, yeah? And so to see where we are now, it's pretty interesting. And I sometimes feel like I want to say certain things. And then I think, but if you turn around and say that, Gary, somebody's going to turn around and say, oh, he's old. He's making up noise about thing, you know what I mean? And it's sad because you should be able to have an opinion and be able to say how you feel about things. Now, as big as this scene is, it's still quite small and intricate. Do you know what I mean? Everybody kind of knows everybody. You know, you've got that crew doing their thing over there, that crew doing that thing over there, that crew doing that thing over there. You know, I only say what I say, and there's a lot more for me to say, but I'm not even going to go into that. You know, it's a healthy scene. It could be a bit more healthier and there could be a little bit more balance. I just would like to see a little bit more balance with certain things. Do you know what I mean? And I would be happy with that. That's all. You know, there's so much. It's like this, the scene. It's circumference. Like, feed the kids some other bits. Let them know that there's this thing here. Do you understand? Let them know that there's this style, there's that style. You know, you're on the radio, you're doing that. Show them. Do you understand what I mean? Educate them. Why are you just pushing just that? Sound like, you know, what is that? Is that even drum and bass? Is it because it's got a break on it, you're calling it drum and bass? Do you understand what I mean? I'm like...
I think we're coming close to the end of this conversation. Do you know what I mean? It's been really a deep dive into your life, personal life and professional life. You know, I'm sure there's tons we've missed out.
There's loads, bro.
But these shows are not 3 hour shows.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Right? But I would like to touch on, if you don't mind, yeah? And this is in support of people who might be going through similar challenges, yeah? Is mum.
Yeah.
And the reason and you.
Yeah.
And why I say that is because, you know, I know mum's not been herself.
My mum is your mum and your mum is
that's right. And that's why I say that.
So we can talk on that.
I wanted to kind of like touch on that because I know that, you know what I mean, I'm kind of like hearing about it through you, and I want to speak about the challenges your mum and you face with her, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, well, mum's suffering now, going through dementia for a few years now. And I think that got brought on quite quickly from when the old man passed away. I always say to my brothers, you know what? I think something's going on with mum. They didn't really kind of listen to what I was saying until they noticed it themselves. And so I honestly think that, you know, the death of, you know, my dad kind of brought that on a little bit quicker. And it's, a lot of people are going through it, you know. I've got some great support, you know. I speak to, you know, Lucy, Randall's ex. I speak to this person who's got, you know, they're going through it with their parents and they would advise me and tell me what's going to go and anything and whatever, you know, Marley Marl, you know, it's a topic of conversation. It's just for me that it's so pretty hard because mum's in St Lucia and I'm here. And, you know, I have to fly over the time and try and spend as much time as I can with her, and then I have to come back to come and work and stuff. And it's a real, you know, I feel like I'm grieving with mum with this dementia thing there because, you know, I was in St Lucia for a month, you know, in December and January, and I was there, me and my partner and my brother Roy. And my brother Roy, he's just, I don't know what I'd do without him actually, do you know what I mean? If there was ever a time in my life that I needed my brother to come up and do anything, it's this time here, because the way how he deals with this whole dementia thing, and my mum, you know, I'm a sensitive soul. I'm an emotional thing, and everybody says that, you know me, bro. But the way how he deals with it, you know, sometimes I just sit in my bedroom and have to shed a tear because I'm watching this woman, and you know how tight me and mum, we're mummy's boys.
Yeah, of course.
I just watch this version every time I go and see her, and we sit down and you know, and sometimes if you catch her when she's good, you'll get jokes because you know my mum's funny anyway. You know, she'll be there, we're joking and things like that, and then all of a sudden she'll say something, and then you're like, oh, do you know what I mean?
Reminds you.
Yeah, it reminds you, like, you know what I mean? And then you have to, it's like a process. You have to learn how to try and deal with it, to try and accept watching this person who gave me life. And me and my mum was like this. Do you know what I mean? For, you know, struggles and stuff. My mum supported me for everything. Do you understand what I mean? And so to watch this woman that has gone through her own thing, losing her husband, you know, sadness and thing, whatever, and then for this to be happening with the dementia and stuff, you know, it's like it breaks me. I'm broken. It's only now I'm starting to be able to go and see her, and when I'm leaving, not be bawling. Do you understand what I mean? And I think that it's such a cruel illness. Do you know what I mean? It's such a cruel illness that you watch somebody with it. You watch, you know, your mother or your father with it, and you just see this person change, you know, and become somebody different. You know, it's 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 it's, it's hard to deal with, but I think with all the trials and tribulations that I've gone through, do you know what I mean? It's like you have to kind of get on, you know, you have to adapt again. Do you understand what I mean? And deal with it. And you know, with the dementia, it doesn't get any better, it gets worse, you know. I just pray to God and hope that mum it plateaus and it stays like that. Because my auntie had it. I went to see her in Canada. She was all right. She had the dementia, wasn't that bad. And then within a year later, you know what I mean? She doesn't even know who I am. You know, my same thing with my uncle. Was with him, you know what I mean? And then a year later, I'm like, Aunts, what's happening? Should we go and have a drink in the bar, you know, in the village? And he's looking at me like, and I'm saying to my cousin Curtis, what's happening with your old man? What's happening with your dad? What's happening with uncle? He goes, Gary's gone. I'm like, what? I said, but like, we was drink. He goes, Gary's gone. And the next thing you know, passed away December. And so I'm starting to really understand this whole thing of trying to once again find some safe spot. Do you know what I mean? In order to be able, I don't know if safe spot was the right term. Do you know, I was blabbering there, but I'm just trying to find this thing in me to be able to just deal with what's next to come, with watching mum go through these changes and what's next, what's going to happen and stuff. You know, I just, you know, I always pray to God, you know what I mean? I say thanks that she's just there. I don't care. I do care that she's changing, but she's just still here.
Yeah,
Do you understand what I mean? And that for me is the most amazing blessing. But it's just a sad thing to watch, man. You know, anybody could tell who's going through it, you know. But there's also some funny moments with it as well, where sometimes I'm like, are you just thinking about been winding me up there, mum, or you know what I mean? Or is the thing kicking now? The other time that I was there, I went and bought some icicles. I put them in the freezer. And so later in the night time there, I finish having a little, you know, little joint and thing, and I'm just there, and I said, well, I want my ice pole in now, my icicle. So I go in the freezer, I can't see my icicles. I said to my girlfriend, I'm like, babe, where's the icicles? Am I losing the plot? I'm sure I bought that. She goes, yeah, you bought some icicles. I said, there's no icicles. Bro goes, you know, mum must have them in it. I goes, boy, if mum's got them, then there's no one going to get them icicles back. The following day now, mum comes out of her bedroom, she got an icicle. Yeah, she's like, you want one? You know what I mean? And I'm like, you're going to give me back my own icicle? She goes, I don't know what you're talking about. And then she just walked off, you know what I mean? So there's funny moments, you know what I mean, within, you know, her having this, you know, this thing, yeah? And so when she's on and she's been funny, it's like, oh, mum's back. And then it could just switch. And so for me, I'm like, okay, this is what it is right about now. I'm just glad I can just go and physically see my mum, because I know a lot of my friends that don't even have their parents here anymore. It's a hard thing to deal with. Do you know what I mean? There's thousands of people. I speak to Darren J, like, he's such a don, man, and he's funny with it as well. He kind of, you know, enlightened me about some stuff, and he went through it with his mum. You know, speak to Lucia, speak to this person, that person. So you kind of feel like you're not on your own. Do you know what I mean? It's
yeah. That's a beautiful thing. Yeah, and I suppose that too is something about this. I don't want to say brotherhood, but brother and sisterhood of our scene.
Yeah.
That we've all known each other now through having their first child.
Yeah.
Some of us have come up through puberty, bruv. You get what I mean? Right? To having a first child, to the breakups, to the parents, to parents passing away and the support, some of us passing away and the support. And so therefore we're fortunate in many ways that we've got a lot more examples of experiences to pull from and lean on.
You know what I take from my scenario that happened to me regarding my dad, and, you know, I went through this really bad thing and all of that, this bad stage of, like, you know, nearly having a breakdown, but just managed to kind of like sort myself out, was that I felt like after that happening like that, and then this other thing happening like that, I'm like, right, you're really getting tested here, guy. You know what I mean? Like, which way is, you know what I mean? You're going to go, da, da, da. It made me feel like my experiences, I don't mind sharing. Do you know what I mean? With people who need someone to talk to. Do you understand what I mean? I honestly believe that if you can help somebody get through something because you're kind of knowledgeable about it, you know, you've gone through your thing, they're like, you should help. I always say that. I feel like if you can help somebody, do you understand, who's going through something, take some time out to phone, check in and stuff, you know. And so from my experiences, you know what I mean, when I went through that, my dad and then my uncle and then thing and whatever, I felt like, you know what, you know, Gary, you should be able to help. Don't feel like, oh, you know, I'm not going to talk about my business, you know, and thing and blah, blah, blah. I've done that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I think that comes with the early parts of being a young person, don't want to share and whatever,
of course.
But we're fortunate in a way that I think everybody should take from that. It's better to talk.
Yeah, I mean, we're at a different time now, so people are talking. People are coming sitting down with therapists. Certain men that I know, original article, Don Gargan, bad man, are saying, you know what, girl, I'll see a therapist now. You know, I'm like, is it? I would have never have thought in my life, you know. And so it just shows you that times have changed, and, you know, and people are going through stuff. You know, we're living in a time, you know, of stress. Do you understand? When people are getting depressed, like, you know, it's the norm.
You know what, Gal? It's interesting because listening to this entire story in this way, even though I've heard all of this story over the years, to hear it in this space of this time like that, it's like a movie, bruv. You know what I mean? The highs and lows of, like, the lives and times of MCGQ.
People go through stuff in it. Do you understand what I mean? And sometimes we all can put on a brave face and then, you know, we just get on with it. And so I am grateful for my experiences and what's happened in my life, because it has molded who I am. Do you know what I mean? With resilience, being mentally strong with situations, because you have no choice to, you know, it's either fold or, you know. And so you know, with everything that's happened, it's made me much more of a stronger person. Do you understand what I mean? I always say, you understand what I mean, what I mean, what I mean. I can't help it. I've been doing it from when I was in school. Everybody in school would tell you that's his thing. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it's, you know, I just grateful, man, for everything. You know, the situation that I am, to still be involved in this music scene, to still get booked. You know, I'm just grateful to be here. And, you know, the life changes that I've had, they've all made me this person that I am. And, you know, I'm grateful for it. And so, yeah.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, man. Yeah, my brother. You know what I mean? It has been...
My brother. That's my brother there. Do you know what I mean?
50 years. You know,
50 years plus.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming, Rob. I really appreciate that. That's a wrap.
Thanks for having me, my brother.
Yeah, big up, big up, big up, big up.